Hi, John with VersaFeed. Today we're doing our second round on Google price and availability suspension warnings, in particular a detailed dive on structured data. Real quick overview on structured data. It exists inside your product landing pages in the HTML. It provides price and availability information amongst other bits of info regarding your products, and it can be available in either microdata or json-ld. For this example, we're going to be looking at microdata exclusively because it's the most common in use in 2020. During this screencast, I'll refer to microdata and structured data as synonyms for simplicity. Here we are on the schema.org website, and this is a third-party institution that defines what structured data can look like, and here we're looking at the product structured data, which defines a product, like it says here, a pair of shoes or a concert ticket, and this is part of what Google will be looking at on your website. And here we have another schema.org entry for an offer, which in our case is going to be something for sale. So this will define the price and the availability of a particular product for sale. So how do we put those two pieces of schema.org information together, both the product and the offer? What you can see here is that we're going to nest the offer object inside of the product. So for the product, we'll list information like the ID or the GTIN, maybe the link in the title, and inside of that entry, we'll have a nested offer object which will contain separately the price and the availability. What else do we need to know about structured data before we start looking at some examples? Well, here you have a link to a Google Merchant Center support article, and I'll put this in the description. And this shows you exactly what schema.org entries and attributes will work with Google, because not every single attribute will work. So if we scroll down here, we'll see that Google notes exactly which attributes from schema.org will correlate to product data within Google Merchant Center. And if we scroll down further, you'll see the same exact thing for the offer schema entry. So exactly which attributes from schema can be read by Google and introduced and read in Google Merchant Center. And you can see here there's a price and an availability. So with that background out of the way, we're going to look at three examples. One, a product that has no variants, as in no different sizes and no different colors. A slightly more complex example of an item with a few different sizes, but the same price. And then lastly, we'll finish with a much more challenging example where we have different sizes and some different prices mixed in with those variants. Here's a simple example product for sale, and if we go ahead and look at the page source, which you can do by right-clicking and looking at View Page Source, you should see something somewhat similar to this. Now this is a chunk of microdata with all the other HTML removed, so it's usually going to be a bit more complex, but in this simplified example, you can see the opening product node, and that has information like the product name, the SKU, and the GTIN. And then before that product node is closed, you can see the nested offer, and that contains the critical information of price and availability. So this looks good. If Google was going to crawl this, they could reference the SKU, which should match your ID in the feed, and maybe the GTIN as well. And inside of that, it's going to have the price and availability, which should reflect the information that you had in your data feed. So if we go back to the product feed in the first example here, you'll see the availability is in stock and the price is $64.99. So this all matches up, and that's great. Let's go ahead and look at the middle example, which is slightly more complex. Here we have a shoe for sale, and if we look, we can see there's a few sizes available. If we click these, what you'll see is the price doesn't change, so it's $150 across the board. So that's what makes this the middle example, where there is a bit of complexity because you have multiple sizes, but it's fairly straightforward in that the price remains the same. So if we right-clicked and looked at the source as we did in the last one, what should that look like? Here you can see it's very similar to what we saw for the single variant. And this isn't necessarily ideal, and we're going to get to the more complex example in a second, but we have one product schema section here, which you can see describes the name and the product description, and then we have that one nested offer inside, which has the price. We're getting away with that because the price doesn't change at all here. It's the same price, $150 for all three sizes. However, that won't always work. Sometimes if you have different prices, you're going to have a more complex version of this schema microdata. Let's look at that more complex version. Here you can see we have 6 different products with different sizes, And the magical part that makes this more challenging is you can see one of these has a different price. So you have variance, and inside of that variance you have a different price. So how does that work? Here's that landing page in real life, and you can see that the small size is selected and the price is $19.96. But if we move that to a large, the price will jump to $21.96, and that's what makes the complexity of the structured data. So how should that structured data look? Let's go ahead and find out. Here you can see the microdata for that jacket, and the first thing that you'll notice is there's a lot more text on the screen, and that's because for every single variant we need to have both the product schema entry and that nested offer. For the very first entry we have it listed as small, and then we have the price below that in the nested offer area, which lists it as $19.96. And you can see we also have SKU and GTIN here, which will be unique for each of these different product entries. Let's go ahead and scroll down and look at the second entry. And what you'll see here is this correlates to the medium size, again with a slightly different SKU and GTIN, and with its own nested offer section that has the price and availability. Finally, if we scroll down to the third entry, what you'll see is the microdata for the large product. And again, the SKU should change, the GTIN should change, but what you'll really notice here is that the offer has the correct price, the $21.96 for this large product. So having these different SKUs and GTINs, each with their own product section and each with their own nested offer, is the official way that Google wants to see this data put into your website. It does make your code, your HTML, a little bit bloaty, but it does give Google all the information they need, even if you have lots of different variants and lots of different prices. Lastly, if you want to test the structured data on an existing product landing page and you don't want to filter through the HTML, as we discussed in the last video, there is this thing called the Google Structured Data Testing tool, and I'll put a link to that in the description of the video. If you load that page, it asks you for a URL. We can enter that, click run the test, and it's going to load that HTML and search that for microdata or json-ld, any kind of structured data, and then it will display that here. So on the right hand side you can see it did find some product data, and if you scroll through this you will see things like the SKU, the GTIN, and if you scroll down you'll see the nested offer, which does contain the price and the availability. The structured data testing tool is a great method to check structured data on existing websites without having to hack through the HTML yourself and look. One other quick tip I'll mention for structured data on variants is you should not be looking for an offer in the structured data that says type aggregate offer. That's not something that's utilized by Google. It is valid schema.org language, but it is not something that the Google bot will parse correctly. So if you see aggregate offer and you see low price, high price, unfortunately that information is not in the required Google format. So you do need to go to this nested format where you have a simple product object and a simple offer object, and you're repeating those over and over, the full product, the full offer, each with its own set of information, and that's how you will satisfy the Google bot crawler and hopefully avoid any future suspension warnings. If you have questions about structured data, feel free to reach out to us. We're on the web at versafeed.com. Thanks for watching.